A little girl gently tugged at Barron Trump's jacket, pointing at the sparkling cross necklace resting on his chest, and asked a simple yet powerful question, powerful enough to make his eyes well up with emotion. The community center in Palm Beach, Florida, teemed with life. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed espresso blending with the scent of fragrant toasted bread, intermingled with the lively chatter of residents gathered for tonight's meeting. This was a place where people still addressed each other by name, a small corner amid the hustle of coastal life, where time seemed to slow down to let people connect. Barron Trump stood beside a long table draped in white cloth, laden with piles of introductory flyers. He smiled warmly as he shook hands and answered questions from everyone. He always cherished events like this, not for the glamour, but for the genuine, unpretentious stories people shared. The quiet, meaningful moments that reminded him why he had chosen this path. While he was conversing with an elderly woman about the local scholarship fund, a slight tug at his sleeve made him pause. At first he thought it was accidental, but the tug repeated, small yet insistent. He turned and looked down to see a little girl, not even 7 years old, with shiny golden curls framing her round face, sprinkled with a few freckles. She clutched the strap of her floral dress tightly, her wide blue eyes fixed intently on the thin golden cross resting on Barron's chest. He crouched down to her level and said in a gentle voice, "Hello there, little one, it's me." Smiling warmly, he asked, "What's your name?" The little girl hesitated before softly replying, "Emily." "Nice to meet you, Emily," Barron said with a tender look in his eyes. Yet the little girl's gaze never left him. Instead, she raised a small, slightly trembling finger and pointed at the cross that lay quietly on his chest. "Mr. Barron, what does that say?" The space around them wasn't completely silent, but for Barron, everything seemed to suddenly fade away, as if the entire room were holding its breath. That question, so simple and innocent, struck him like a powerful undercurrent. That cross had been by his side for many years, always close to his heart. Not merely a piece of jewelry, but a deep memory, a symbol of something far greater than himself. And now, for the first time in a long while, a little girl had forced him to confront its meaning. He parted his lips as if to answer, but his throat constricted, and no words emerged. Instead, his mind drifted far away, back to a day he had long tried to bury in the past. Yet there are some memories that never fade, no matter how hard you try. Barron blinked, still kneeling before the little girl, though his mind had wandered elsewhere, back to the early days of 2024, a moment etched into him in a way he had never imagined. He had just turned 17, living under the bright spotlight of the Trump family in Florida, outwardly calm, yet internally overwhelmed by chaotic emotions he never spoke of. He faced pressure from school, relentless media scrutiny, and an ambiguous feeling that he wasn't enough to carry the Trump name. His parents always taught him about faith, but at that age, it seemed so distant. He still attended church with his family, still whispered prayers before sleep, yet it all felt like an empty routine, as if talking to a void. Then a phone call came on January 9th, 2024, when the light from the night lamp in his room at Mar-a-Lago flickered weakly. He was scrolling on his phone when it rang. He almost didn't answer, but a strange intuition made him pick it up. When his mother's trembling voice came through the line, he knew immediately. His grandmother, Amalija Knavs, who had once told him Slovenian stories at the dinner table, who always carried the delicate scent of flowers and spoke of faith as if it were her very breath, had passed away. A sudden, unheralded heart attack, with no signs, no farewells. Barron barely remembers the hours that followed. All that remained was the quiet sobbing of his mother somewhere in the house, the numbing chill in his chest, and the suffocating pain of realizing he would never hear her voice again. For the first time, he felt truly alone. The next morning, he mechanically prepared for the funeral, packing his things into a suitcase to head to the nearby church. But his hands trembled as if he were living in someone else's body. When he stepped into the family living room at Mar-a-Lago, where his grandmother used to sit and chat, everything felt awry. Her favorite chair was empty now. The air was heavy, stifling with unsaid words. That night, unable to sleep, he went to a corner of the room where she had once kept her personal belongings during visits. The scent of flowers still lingered in the air, clinging to the handkerchief and her coat. On a small table, something caught his eye, a delicate, thin gold necklace, with the cross pendant lying silently beside the small Bible she always carried. His grandmother had worn that necklace every day he saw her. Barron picked it up, his fingers gliding over the cool metal. Something made him pause. Its weight in his hand was unlike anything else, not merely jewelry, but a piece of something larger, something he wasn't yet ready to confront. Yet sometimes, faith finds you before you seek it. Barron stood there, in the dim light of the room, gripping the cross so tightly that it imprinted its shape onto his palm. He awaited solace, but instead, a surge of anger welled up. Why would God take his beloved grandmother, the one who was full of love, who stood firm in her faith, leaving him with unanswered questions? He had heard about finding peace in loss, that everything happens for a reason. But that night, nothing made sense. Even so, he still wore the necklace around his neck, letting the cross press against his chest. At first, it was icy and unfamiliar. Then suddenly, as if the weight became too great a burden to bear, he broke down. Tears streamed uncontrollably, shaking his entire body as he collapsed onto the sofa. It wasn't a gentle cry, but a heart-wrenching outpouring that left him hollow. Breathless, he lowered his head, pressing his face against the handkerchief his grandmother had left behind, the lingering scent of flowers still clinging to it. He didn't know how long he sat there, but eventually he whispered, perhaps to himself, perhaps to God, "God, if you are truly listening, if you really exist, if you are there, I need to know. I need to feel something, anything, because right now, I feel nothing." The silence that followed was deafening. There was no echo from on high, no warm surge or sudden clarity, only the distant murmur of the ocean waves outside the window and the soft rustling of the palm fronds in the Mar-a-Lago garden. Barron should have felt foolish, should have risen to wipe away his tears and vowed to move on, but he did not. Instead, he sat there, unmoving, waiting for a sign, and then something happened. It wasn't a word from heaven or a miraculous vision like those in the books. It was a subtle change, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. His heart, which, only minutes before, had felt as if it were being torn apart by the pain of losing his grandmother, gradually began to slow. The suffocating sensation in his chest did not vanish, but it eased just a little. His breathing, once rapid and chaotic, grew more even, and deep within, where only he could feel, it was as if a quiet warmth was slowly seeping into the coldest corners of his soul. It wasn't the answer, it wasn't the escape, but it was something. For the first time since his mother had broken the news that fateful night, he no longer felt as though he was drowning. He clutched the cross between his fingers, gazing at it through blurred tears. It had once belonged to his grandmother, Amalija, but now it seemed to have chosen him, as if it were a thread linking him to her. He did not know what lay ahead, nor was he sure if his faith would ever return to the innocence and simplicity of his childhood. But he knew one thing: he was not alone, and that was enough to move forward. Yet faith is not just a moment, it is an entire journey, and the next step is often the hardest. In the days following his grandmother's passing, it felt as though he was trudging through wet sand, slow, heavy, and uncertain. Barron tried to maintain a normal appearance, offering faint smiles to his consoling relatives and nodding through condolences that blended into a vague echo. But now, something had changed. He still carried unanswered questions and still felt a piercing pain every time he thought of her permanent departure, yet each time his hand touched the delicate cross resting on his chest, he felt steadier. A week later, he returned to his school in Florida, stepping out of the family car with a heart that was not yet healed, but no longer shattered. He had feared that loneliness would once again overwhelm him, yet instead, he discovered a quiet strength. One night, about a month later, Barron sat in a corner of the school library, flipping through the pages of a book his eyes no longer cared to read. A classmate, Jacob Miller, Someone he had only exchanged a few brief greetings with sat down across from him, his eyes bloodshot and empty as if he had just lost the world. "You okay, Jacob?" Barron asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. Jacob fell silent for a moment, then, with trembling breath, mumbled, "My dad just died yesterday." Barron froze, his heart constricting. He could have said, "I'm so sorry," or "You must be in so much pain," but those words would have sounded hollow, like a breeze that failed to touch the depth of Jacob's sorrow. Instead, he reached out and touched the cross, rubbing it between his fingers as he had done countless times since that night at Mar-a-Lago. "I lost my grandmother last month," he said, his voice lowering. "I'm not good at comforting, but I understand what it feels like when everything seems meaningless." Jacob swallowed hard, his jaw clenching, his eyes blinking rapidly to hold back tears. "Yeah, me too." Barron hesitated, then removed the necklace and held it out to Jacob. "You can have it if you want?" Jacob stammered, eyes wide. "You're not keeping it," Barron replied, his tone soft yet resolute. "Just borrowing it until you feel a little lighter." Jacob said nothing at first, merely gazing at him as though Barron had just handed him the entire sky. Then, with trembling hands, he accepted it. Barron never imagined that this moment, this small gesture, would be the beginning of so many things to come. For sometimes, faith is not about knowing everything, but about appearing when someone is so lost they cannot find their way out. But faith always finds a way back when you least expect it. Barron's voice softened as he pulled himself back to the present, to the little girl Emily standing before him, her large eyes silently watching. He still felt the weight of that day when he let go of something that had once anchored him, hoping it would support someone else. He looked down at the new cross around his neck, the one he had bought to replace the one he gave away. Yet the first one, his grandmother Amalija's, would never return. A year after he lent it to Jacob, Jacob told him he couldn't return it, that it was still the thing that kept him standing. Barron only smiled softly. "Then keep it." And now, many months later, he stood there, facing the question of a little girl who had no idea how that small piece of gold had changed him. Barron took a deep breath. "My grandmother once had one just like this," he said, his fingers gliding over the cross. "At first I thought it was merely decoration, something pretty to wear, but when she died, I realized it meant so much more. It reminded me that even when I feel alone, I am never truly alone." Emily's eyes shone with something that Barron recognized, a quiet understanding far beyond her years. "My mom used to have one too," she whispered, her small hand touching the empty space at her neck. "Mom had to sell it," she said. "We needed money for food, more than for jewelry." Barron's chest tightened. He didn't need to ask where her mom was. The tremor in her voice said it all. Without hesitation, he reached behind his neck and gently removed his necklace. Emily's eyes grew wide as Barron took her hand and placed the cross into her small palm. "Now it's yours," he said, his voice warm. Emily stared at it, her lips trembling. "But I can't accept it." "You can," Barron interjected, his smile gentle yet assured. "And every time you wear it, remember that no matter what happens, you are never alone." Emily's tiny fingers clutched the necklace tightly, tears streaming down her rosy cheeks as a choked sob burst from her throat. Suddenly, she lunged forward, her delicate arms wrapping around Barron Trump's neck, holding him so tightly as if afraid he would vanish. Barron embraced her, feeling the little girl's fragile body trembling in waves against him, her warmth blending with the cool chill of a Florida evening. All around, the murmuring chatter of the crowd at the Palm Beach Community Center fell into silence, as if the entire world had stopped breathing. A sacred, profound feeling enveloped the room, a feeling that needed no words to describe. Sometimes, the most powerful moments speak for themselves. Emily clung to Barron, and time seemed to stretch on endlessly. When she finally let go, she wiped away her tears with the back of her hand, yet her fingers still held the cross as if it were the most precious treasure. Barron saw fleeting emotions on the child's face: gratitude, wonder, and a quiet pain that only those who have faced hardship can understand. A woman, Laura, stepped out from the crowd, her hands trembling as though she were holding back something immense. Barron knew immediately, without her uttering a word, this was Emily's mother. I don't know what to say," Laura whispered, her voice choked with emotion, her tired yet warm eyes drifting between Barron and her daughter. "Every night before bedtime, my little one would ask about the old necklace, the one I had to sell. I never imagined there would be another." Barron smiled gently. "Well, now she has one, Laura." Laura swallowed hard, her lips pressed together, her trembling breath escaping as if she were trying to keep her composure. "Thank you," she said softly, as though afraid her voice might break. "This means more than you think." But Barron understood its significance well, for he had once been in Emily's position, receiving a glimmer of hope when everything seemed to be falling apart. The crowd, which had been as silent as stone, began to stir. A few people discreetly wiped away tears, exchanging silent glances filled with meaning. Several elderly women in simple attire pressed their hands to their hearts and nodded as if in understanding of a profound truth. Then something unexpected happened. A man, Henry, stepped forward from behind. He was tall, wearing a worn shirt, his hands calloused from years of labor. He rummaged in his pocket, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and gently placed them into Laura's hand. "Use this to buy food for your child," he said, his voice deep yet sincere. Laura gasped, shaking her head in alarm. "No, I can't accept this." "Please," Henry interjected, his voice firm yet warm. "This isn't charity born of pity. It's simply the right thing to do." And as if an invisible door had swung open, kindness spread throughout the room. Another person stepped forward, handing Laura a gift card from a local supermarket. A middle-aged woman removed a silver bracelet from her wrist and handed it to Emily, whispering, "This will look lovely paired with your necklace." One by one, small gestures followed one another, each simple on its own, but together forming a powerful wave. Barron stepped back, silently watching as those once strangers became familiar faces in that moment. This was no longer about him, never had it been, but about something greater, sparked by an innocent question from Emily. For sometimes, faith is not only the belief held in one's heart, but also concrete action. And those moments do not simply pass, they leave an indelible mark, something that endures beyond time. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Barron paused for a moment, watching Emily clutch the cross to her chest and Laura holding her daughter's hand, their eyes still glistening with unshed tears as they whispered something only the two of them understood. It was a simple moment, almost lost amidst the soft murmurs of conversation in the room, but Barron knew it would forever be etched in their hearts, and in his as well, if he remained true. He had come to the community center only hoping for a few handshakes, some polite conversation, maybe a little gentle encouragement, but instead, he was reminded of an age-old lesson. The smallest things can carry the greatest weight. Emily did not know it, but she had given him an invaluable gift. She reminded him that faith has meaning, that kindness, especially when given without expectation, is worth more than anything. He had once thought that faith required a clear answer. On the night of his grandmother Amalija's passing, he had prayed for a definite sign, just one. But as he grew older, he realized one thing: faith is not about understanding, but about trust. Trust that even on the worst days when answers do not come, there is still light somewhere. And sometimes, that light comes from a tiny hand tugging at your sleeve. Barron exhaled, a sudden warmth spreading through his chest. He intended to turn away, but before he could take a step, he felt another slight tug. Emily looked up at him, still clutching the cross. "Mr. Barron?" she asked, her clear emotional voice ringing out, and Barron sat back down, smiling. "What is it, little one?" Emily hesitated, then said, "I think my mom was right. You've given me more than just a gift," Barron replied, his voice warm. "And you've given me more than just a question." Emily beamed, then ran back to her mother. Barron watched them go, his heart feeling lighter than ever. He did not know what challenges lay ahead for Emily and Laura, nor could he promise that life would always be easy, but he knew that he and everyone here could ensure they would never be alone on that journey. And sometimes, just a simple act of kindness is enough. He turned toward the exit and stepped out into the cool Florida evening, the sky painted in deep blue tinged with soft orange, and the first stars shimmering above. As he walked back to the car, He glanced at the spot where the necklace had lain a few hours before. It was gone, yet strangely, he had never felt more whole. Some moments stay with us forever. Sometimes, just one kind word, one small gift, one moment of understanding can change an entire life. So next time you have the chance to show kindness, seize it, and let your true self shine through. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. We'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.